Hello, beautiful community. Just a tiny video today about emotional tips for following the counteroffensive. I think a lot of you will be doing that day by day, and so I just wanted to share this. And the first thing is really that it's inevitable and routine that some of the shiny tech that Ukraine has got from the West is going to be blown up. And you're going to see that stuff on fire, exploded. And that's because this stuff is not magical. It's better tech, but it's not magical. And I think that there is no harm in following the counteroffensive day by day, but you want to feel a level of proportionality that's not going to take you on a roller coaster like this with different kinds of news days coming and going, accompanied by visceral pictures. And I think if you want to close in on anything, close in on not these pictures that are not necessarily going to represent reality and going to put you in an emotional yo-yo up and down state, but focus in more on Ukraine, on the fact that Ukraine is real, right? Because we often talk about how folks who don't get this war sort of erase Ukraine's agency, but I think actually in the pro-war Western public, there's a lot of room to connect more with the reality of Ukraine and actually to go a bit beyond just taking a pro-Ukrainian position that's deep down just an anti-Russian Empire position. And that means, all of us realizing that Ukraine is real, that Ukraine's struggle is real, and that young Ukrainians who are fighting for their country's culture and independence are also real. And one of the marvelous things about that reality is that, and this is really my second point, that takes you out of a predicament where you get the gamification of war, right? Where you've got an ever multiplying number of multi-shaped and multicolored arrows accompanied by various pictures from the battleground. And, knowing more about Ukraine isn't just about curiosity or about consolidating your political position or support. It's also a form of self-knowledge. And actually the same is true of getting to know more about Russia and the way its culture and politics is in crisis. Learning more about these two now very, very different places is actually for us a form of self-knowledge, because we ourselves are trying to figure out how to sustain a certain kind of political order in the modern world. And the third thing I really wanted to say is that it's a bonus and an overachievement and a surprisingly splendid outcome if Ukraine manages to win the war via this counteroffensive. That's not the expectation. And it's important that you don't overload on that scenario, right? And that's important actually not just for you, but for Western policymakers, as we discussed in that counteroffensive video in the main channel, because the West is going to have to be there after the counteroffensive. And there are going to be different kinds of discourse. For instance, we'll increasingly hear the story that, well, given Ukraine weapons, Ukraine has had a go, good and fine, but given that the results are, if that's what we're going to see, relatively limited, it's now time to resolve this war, right? And there's, of course, weight to that, but there are problems with it too. One being that, of course, Ukraine could have been in a different position if it got more weapons than earlier, right? And if Ukraine doesn't dramatically exceed expectations with the counteroffensive. And of course, historically, Ukraine has always overachieved and Russia has underachieved militarily in this conflict. But if Ukraine does not dramatically exceed expectations, and there is motivation to somehow bring the war to a close in the West, there is nothing that can actually be done, right, that could sort of cancel Mr. Putin's aspiration toward a larger confrontation with the West later on in the decade. Because that's not a personal ambition anymore for Putin. That is a kind of set of rails on which the state is being reformatted. And so, we can dance and talk all we like, but the reality is no kind of peace deal now, right, even if Ukraine were to accept it, is going to, as it were, suspend that project of Putin's. It'll just be a period for Putin to reconstitute. So we'll be back making that argument, right, unless Ukraine spectacularly succeeds with the counteroffensive. But it's important to see that as a possible outcome as we look ahead with uncertainty. But it's very important that you don't set that as an expectation, because you won't just be disappointed, you will not have a sort of a long-range vision that a responsible Western citizen might have about this. Lots of love, talk soon.